This is the story about our American Revolution. British General Lord Cornwallis could not suppress the American rebellion in the South. Frustrated by losses at Kings Mountain, Cowpens, and Guilford Courthouse, Cornwallis moved his army north to Virginia in an effort to turn off the spigot of French aid that was helping fuel the American resistance. By establishing a military base of operations at Yorktown, Cornwallis could be reinforced by British Royal Navy supply ships, vessels that were soon engaged in a fierce naval battle off the Virginia Capes. While French and British ships battled for control of the Chesapeake Bay, Generals George Washington and Rochambeau were marching their troops and wagon trains south through Virginia to lay siege to Yorktown, entrapping Cornwallis and his entire army. This is the story of that march.
Hello, and welcome to the Real American Revolution, where we explore what really happened before, during, and after America's War for Independence. Our series, retracing the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route National Historic Trail through Virginia, is sponsored by the National Park Foundation and the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route Association, commonly referred to as W3R US. My name is Randy Flood, and I'll be your host through this series. Today we're at Rippon Lodge in Woodbridge, Virginia, a very historic site, and we're pleased to have with us Dr. Robert Seelig, who's the expert in the Washington-Rochambeau Trail nationwide. So Bob, it's delightful to have you here, and tell us about Rippon.
Well, thank you very much, Randy, for this kind introduction as we are going down the Washington-Rochambeau Revolutionary Route, or as it was called in the 18th century, the Old Boston Post Road or the King's Highway. We just stopped at the Occoquan Run, and now we are on the next stop on our tour to Yorktown, and that is Rippon Lodge. If you wonder where the name Rippon Lodge comes from, well, Thomas Blackburn, the owner of this lodge, who built it in 1747, when he came over from Rippon, England, he named the place where he lived after his hometown in England. Rippon Lodge was a place that General Washington visited quite frequently. The Blackburns, Thomas Blackburn, and the Washingtons were great friends, and we know that they spent many a day and many a night here at Rippon Lodge, because even though Mount Vernon is only about 15 or 16 miles away from here, and you can drive that in your car in maybe a half hour, if you have to cover this distance in a horse-drawn carriage or on a horse that goes maybe 2 miles an hour, 3 miles an hour, it's going to take you a couple hours to get home at night. And so it was just as easy to stay here overnight with your friends. Now, Thomas Blackburn, just like his friend George Washington, was also a patriot, and in 1775 he's the first important person from the county here to organize a military company, a militia company, to fight in this war of independence. Later on he joins the Continental Army, fights at Germantown in October of 1777, where he is wounded. Then he comes back here to Rippon Lodge, to his home, to cure his wounds and to resume his life. Resuming his life means that he pretty much stays at Rippon Lodge until the war comes to him. And the war comes to him in the summer of 1781 in the person of George Washington and the Comte de Rochambeau, who are marching their armies, their troops past Rippon Lodge down to Yorktown to encounter and to fight with Lord Cornwallis. Now, who is this Comte de Rochambeau who is traveling with General Washington now from Mount Vernon all the way to Yorktown? Comte de Rochambeau, Rochambeau is born in 1725, so he's about 5 years older than Washington actually is. Initially he was supposed to become a priest, but when his older brother dies, he's the surviving son of the family, and he leaves the training to be a priest and joins the military at age 17. He's a cornet in a cavalry regiment. In 1759 he receives his own regiment already. He distinguishes himself in the French and Indian War, the 7 Years' War that we have in Europe going on at the time. And at the age of 31 in 1761, he has reached the zenith of his career, just like Washington, but fate had something else planned for them, namely to bring them together in America for the War of Independence and for the Yorktown campaign. As a matter of fact, I just saw General Rochambeau coming out of the Mr. Blackburn's home, which really does not surprise me, because the Washingtons and the Blackburns being such good friends from years past, it doesn't surprise me that General Washington took the opportunity to introduce you to his old friends on his way down to Yorktown. Now, General, it's a great pleasure to see you. We just saw you a couple of days ago at Mount Vernon.
Indeed.
As you are making your way down to Yorktown. Do you have a couple minutes that can ask you some questions, please?
Yes, of course. Perhaps only a couple of minutes, because as you know, we're in a hurry, but yes, of course.
Yes, okay. My first question is, why do you think King Louis, your master, chose you to command this very critical, this very important campaign in America, a campaign which has to be successful, otherwise the United States will lose that war?
Well, as you know, I am a seasoned veteran. I began my military career as a very young man, as a young lieutenant in the cavalry. That is an excellent experience for any officer in the French armies, to start with the cavalry and then move to the infantry, as I did within a short period of time. I served for His Majesty in the War of the Austrian Succession. I served with distinction in Germany during the 7 Years' War, which in America is known as the French and Indian War. It was the same conflict, though it was fought in Europe as well as in America. I then also was very, very involved in dealing with the supplies and logistics support of the French military, which is of course critical in a foreign country here. So I have some experience in how to manage the resources and allocations that are afforded to the troops, which is again especially critical in a country where you must move from one location to the next. Again, we did not know we would be landing in Rhode Island necessarily, but to have to move that many men and supplies requires someone who has had experience and knowledge of what can be done to do that. And again, in a foreign country. We had rudimentary knowledge of the roads here. They were good, we knew, but it would have taken a great deal of ingenuity to overcome any shortcomings in the roads, any damage to the roads, any attack by British forces en route. All those kinds of things had to be taken into account. So an officer like myself would have known better how to deal with that than someone who had just been appointed by the Ministry of War in France. And speaking of the ministry, the Comte de Vergennes was very much my supporter. He convinced His Majesty, number one, to send French forces into the conflict here in North America and to send the French fleet. So it is, of course, not without flaw that the Comte de Vergennes also would send officers of my caliber to take on such a command. By all accounts, in many countries, the force we have here in this country is considered small. I realize it is significantly more than many of the units of the Continental Army, but nonetheless, we knew that with a smaller force, you had to have capable and qualified leadership.
General, when you first met the Continental Army outside New York City in July, what was your impression of the Continental Army?
Yes, that is an excellent question. I recall General Washington reviewed the French troops, and of course we had just arrived, although we had some men who were ailing and sick, some of scurvy, others of other illnesses and ailments. we still presented in the most honorable fashion in clean white French uniforms. Well, I must say I was somewhat appalled when I saw the Continental Forces the following day or the day after when I did the reciprocal inspection. These men were in rags. Their uniforms were almost non-existent. That which they had was in terrible shape. The lack of footwear, shoes, the lack of stockings even for some of these men, barefoot or wrapped in bandages to prevent the biting of the cold in winter. I was very much impressed by this because in that condition, you would have thought that they would not have been in the kind of spirits that they were. But these men displayed happiness. They were smiling. They were cheering. They were enthusiastic. They quite obviously felt deeply about their cause and the righteousness of their cause. It is that way in which men are led. Clearly, if it is not General Washington, I would like to meet the general who has inspired them thusly, because it was something to behold for a military man like myself, who has led troops for over 40 years now. I was completely astounded by the dedication and patriotism of these men I saw.
We know that General Washington has maybe 2,500 men in his army. How many troops are in your army that are marching or going to Yorktown with you?
Well, if you're talking in terms of this particular campaign, no, I was not terribly surprised, although I will tell you that currently the number of forces from the Expedition Particulière here in Virginia is about 4,000. That is almost 1,000 less than came with me, but you must recall that some have been left in Rhode Island, some have been left en route along the way to assist the American Continental Forces where they're positioned in and around New York. Remember, it is of extreme importance that General Clinton believed that our forces intend to encircle, lay siege to, or capture New York. Although by this time I'm sure he is certain that we are not going to do that. We have indeed moved south. But we also must keep up the appearances that our forces can be stretched from Connecticut all the way to Virginia, and we can still be victorious. If you look at the American size contingent with us now, it's roughly around 2,500 to 3,000 forces at this point. That is, again, smaller than the French contingent in this particular expedition. But if you look again at the number of forces in uniform for the American cause and stretched from here all the way to New England, that is still a sizable number of men to mass together for one campaign against Yorktown.
Well, Lord Cornwallis is encamped down in the little village of Yorktown. Who is down there to keep an eye on him to make sure he doesn't just pack up camp and march back to Carolina, for example?
That is also an excellent question, and I will tell you that we have the American General Lafayette, who is in the area as well, and has not left Lord Cornwallis. Every moment he's tried to move and change position, leave the peninsula or move northward or southward again. So he has harried him completely in all movements that the British have tried to make out of Yorktown in that area. That has been of great help to General Washington and myself, because it just kept Lord Cornwallis bottled into that narrow peninsula of land. But you must ask General Washington more about that, because once again, General Lafayette is an American general and he is serving under Washington's command, not mine.
The Marquis de Lafayette is down here with his troops, and he can keep them from marching away, but there's still the British Navy. What keeps the British Navy from just sailing into Yorktown Harbor and embarking Lord Cornwallis's troops and just sail away with them?
Well, sir, I will tell you, the fact of the matter is that a French fleet under the command of the Comte de Tilly, the Admiral de Grasse, is in the area. He's come up from the Caribbean, and he has dispensed with the British fleet that was there to potentially remove Cornwallis and the British troops from the peninsula, which they cannot do now because Admiral de Grasse is in the area and will keep the ships of the British occupied. The Royal Navy will not be able to get near Yorktown as long as Admiral de Grasse is in the area, I can assure you. Well, it's been my pleasure speaking with you this afternoon. As you know, as I mentioned before, we are in haste. We are attempting to make Williamsburg by nightfall this evening. We will be leaving shortly, and I believe I see General Washington calling for me, and no doubt he has some assistance to request. So I must leave you and bid you a good day, and I shall leave at this point. Your servant, sir.
Thanks so much for your very valuable insight into what happened here at Rippon Lodge. To our viewers, thank you for watching. Join us for our next episode at Prince William Forest Park. On behalf of the Real American Revolution, my name is Randy Flood. So long for now.